Hello out there, world. Welcome to episode 3 of Wheelbite this week, discussing the coveted topic of music in skate videos. What makes a soundtrack great, how important it is to our culture at large. A lot of people can attest that they got into so many bands through watching videos growing up. I feel that's definitely still true for today's generation, and it's probably one of the most appealing things of watching a skate video is learning about new music that you get to dig up and uncover and fall in love with, because finding great records and songs and stuff is, outside of any subculture, it's a huge part of just life. You find songs that just stick with you forever, and you carry that with you for the rest of your life. And skate videos have had a history of doing that for a lot of people in my generation. It's how I got into Radiohead, The Misfits, Hieroglyphics, Cat Stevens, Modest Mouse, Queen, Grey Matter, Iggy Pop and the Stooges. The list goes on and on and on. I mean, it was just the most important thing for me growing up. When I would watch skate videos with my friends, I'd be wondering, what song am I going to go home and download on Napster tonight to show my age right here. I'm rambling a bit here because, of course, this is a topic that I was looking so forward to finally discussing. This will also be part of a 2-week series where we discuss musical things. Next week, we're going to have a really cool guest who is from the music world, not the skateboarding world, professionally speaking. So, without further ado, I'm just going to get right into it.
Welcome to San Francisco. Don't skate here.
I feel like it's dangling by a fucking strain of bone marrow.
East Coast powerhouse.
From the New York, I stab you in the Russian War.
Carter, it is fucking Friday the fucking 10th.
I'll give you $100 and I'll take out the Benihana's if you slide that 75-foot handrail.
I especially like the flip of the board.
What up, what up? Welcome to yet another episode of Wheel Bite. Season 3. I'm host 1 of 2, Ted Theodore Mater. With me, as always, is my man
Jay Green here. What up?
Today is a very special topic. One that I know I've said this a few times, but this time I really fucking mean it.
I can vouch this is for sure true.
This has been a topic that since the conception of this show we've been wanting to cover, and I do say that often, but this time it's like 100% super real.
I'm pretty sure you wanted to do a podcast strictly
I did.
on this topic.
So yeah, initially my podcast idea was just to cover this, and that is the parallels with skateboarding and music, and how we use music to make skateboarding videos and skating in general better and more enhanced and more of an experience. So to kick things off, we're gonna go with favorite parts and songs and like what song it was. So I was able to narrow it down to 2. The one that's more recent, for me, not in general, it's an old video, but I didn't discover this part until maybe like a year and a half ago, and that's Jerry Sue, Louis Barletta, and Osiris, Subject to Change, which is like so random, but they skate to New Order's Age of Consent, which is one of my favorite fucking songs, and they did it good. They didn't just fucking like throw it in there and hope it stuck. Like the way they edit it, the way tricks come at certain points in the song, it just works. And also, like, you can tell they're just having fun, and that song just emphasizes that point that much more. The other one I want to pick is old as well, but this goes back to me being a teenager, and that's Jamie Thomas, Misled Youth, with The Who's Baba O'Reilly. Because up until that point, The Who was just some fucking rock band my dad liked. You know, I didn't know that they were cool or awesome or anything. It was just my dad's music. And when you're 13 years old and you're growing up on punk rock, your entire ideology is basically fuck my dad's music. And for real, most of my dad's music was like Jackson Browne, James Taylor. He loved like white guys singing about white things. But The Who, like after seeing Jamie Thomas skate to that song, like I knew that they fucking rocked, and I thought that that song fucking rocked. And I will forever curse anyone who calls that song Teenage Wasteland. Like, fuck you, you're an idiot. It's called Baba O'Reilly. Fucking Seth Rogen emphasizes this point in Freaks and Geeks, and I emphasize it right here, right now. So those are my two. Jay?
Was definitely waiting with great anticipation to hear yours, and you never disappoint. Of course, it was a deep cut. I'm basically just going to be talking about Sight Unseen this whole episode. And there's I'm just playing, just kidding. The one that came to mind, and I don't know if it's because it's like funny enough, it's two of my favorite parts ever. But and there's an honorable mention in there too. Is the first one that came to mind was Henry Sanchez's part in Sight Unseen. I believe that was a Cali Agents song.
Yeah. Planet Asia, yeah, and Cali Agents. And that was a moment where kind of a lot of things were happening for me. It was me seeing my favorite part, for the first time, and then being introduced to a new artist through a skate video. Yeah. Something we will talk about at great length.
And then the other one is Rob Welsh and Ride or Die, The Art of War. I forget who the artist is. But again, another one of my all-time favorite video parts. And then John Cardiel in Sight Unseen 2 with the Sizzla song. I think that fit that type of skating, and just him being the way he is, that was such a perfect fit. And then an honorable mention, which is definitely one of my favorites, is Mike Carroll and Rick Howard in Penal Code.
Oh yeah, what's that song? I forget the name of the song. I just always remember that line, I got more game than Sega CD.
Yeah.
Which is about as 90s as it gets.
I fucking love that part. I love the flow of the song and how the skating switches off between them, and it's super vibey. I love it.
Mike Carroll has consistently chosen good music for his parts. The Plan B questionable part was what got me into the Beastie Boys punk side of things, because when I was a teenager and first getting into their pre-hip hop stuff, I was kind of confused. I always thought they were a hip-hop group, and then one day you learn that their roots are in hardcore punk, and it kind of changed my whole perspective on them. But Mike Carroll made their punk shit look so fucking cool when he skated to Time for Living.
He's always had some great music.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And he's been consistent with the Beastie Boys over the years as well.
I feel like he's definitely one who's always put a lot of thought into it.
Yeah. He had, was it Andre Nicotina? Yeah, in Chocolate Tour. He's always been good about that. So the first question we have here written in our notes is, how important is a video soundtrack? Why? Well, it's good to ask that question point blank, because I personally think it's probably one of the most important parts of a skate video. I mean, obviously the tricks, the all that stuff, that's
The most important part? Slow down.
No, I do, because the tricks, the substance of the video is all very important. But it don't mean shit if your soundtrack sucks.
I disagree.
I don't know. I can think of some banging videos that had terrible soundtracks, and like that's why they're so dismissible. Which,
Lay it on me.
here's some examples of like, let's talk about audio one step beyond real quick.
I knew you were going to pick that one.
So,
No.
well, audio, that video is great. Okay, don't get me wrong, but you know, eventually they had to change the soundtrack for the DVD release.
I know, which I hated.
Exactly. The tricks were all still the same.
Wasn't the original one like a bunch of drum bass?
No, dude, there was like Danzig in there and Guns N' Roses and stuff. Like
Maybe I'm thinking of the redo.
the redo was more like generic ass shit. Like they had to redo a bunch of shit to make it okay to release on DVD and still obtain the rights to things. But that made the video less special. That was enough to just, like, a video we already knew and that we already enjoyed for one thing, now like went down a couple pegs for DVD because it was a different soundtrack that didn't punch as hard.
I fucking love that video. Danny Montoya, Kenny Anderson, Ed Salego. I think this is going to be one of those episodes where we disagree a lot.
Oh, that's fine. I mean, I just think the music is the most important thing. Like, it really is.
You know what how I think about it and how I'd put it is, I think it's not so much about the music selection, which sure some can be cringeworthy, but I think it's more about the song and music selection fitting the skating and the aesthetic of the video, as opposed to just like really good, deep cut music being chosen.
But I mean, I think that it doesn't even need to be deep cut music. Like, I feel like sometimes people pick fucking pop songs that are terrible, like, when listened to by themselves, but then you're like, oh, but watching this guy skate to this song is so fucking cool. Like, here's a video that I didn't think had a great soundtrack. Fucking, with the exception of, like, one song in it, Transworld's A Time to Shine, with, like, the Cooper Wilt part at the beginning had a fucking kick-ass song. It had Little Girl by Death from Above. But then the rest of the video, like, none of it really fucking grabbed me, and that's why, like, as much as that video has some legendary-ass shit in it, and, like, a lot of those new Transworld videos, I feel, kind of carry that motif. The music is too, like, strange, or, like, doesn't quite grab me the way that, like, old Transworld videos had fucking kick-ass song choices that you were, like, you had to pay attention. I mean, you picked a ton of songs from Sight Unseen for your fucking intro.
I mean, all the way to Heath Kirchart, man.
I mean,
like,
dude,
come
yeah,
on,
the
that
Moody
video-
Blues, yeah,
Dude,
it's fucking great.
That video is so fucking fire.
But then,
all
like,
the way through.
some of these modern Transworld videos, the soundtrack is just so weak, and that's why they're so forgettable, even though you're watching parts from, like, some of skating's biggest fucking names.
Well, I mean, we'll agree to disagree, but I think for me it's just more about having a more cohesive, which is actually interesting because I chose Sight Unseen, which the music has no cohesive theme to it.
Well, that's the beauty
but
of Transworld videos.
The song selection goes perfect with each skater.
Yeah, well, I think cohesive song choice is more a brand thing. Like, Zero is always going to, for the most part, have fucking, like, heavy music. It's always going to be
for me, it's
guitars
just
and
the-
fucking riffs and
The
skulls.
The style of skating. You ever see the first Western Edition video?
Was that 48 Blocks?
No, I think it's called We Did It or something like that. And Brad Johnson skates to a Nelly, and it's like a pop rap song, and it's so wacky, dude. I don't know why that's something I always think of when you bring this subject up, but if you're listening, check that out.
Well, I always think of this one shot video from Jersey where Joe Tookmanian, who's on 5 Baro now, he had a part and he skated to an Avril Lavigne song, which is like so fucking whack.
I mean,
but
there's
like
got to be like an inside joke there. Right?
probably, but like it still sort of fit his part to a point where I was like, I remember being a kid and being like, wait, do I like Avril Lavigne now?
Do I have to like?
Do I have to enjoy her now because of this part? But I mean, fuck Avril Lavigne. But I do stand by the fact that I think it's like probably the most important thing, because as a kid too,
I think you have an extreme opinion.
Well, I do, because I'm
investment in this because you're a musician.
I was gonna say I'm more a musician than I am a fucking skater, and as a kid growing up, the reason videos fucking grabbed me was because the music was really cool. So like notable video soundtracks, you know, you don't have as many nowadays, I feel. I mean, so much has been used
they
too.
Don't stand out like they used to.
Right. Like I remember watching Photosynthesis as a kid, and all those songs, whether I liked them, knew them, or what, like they all stood out to me, and I pretty much had every Photosynthesis song on my computer. Like I loved the Habitat beats. I fucking looked forever to find that Roots beat that Anthony Papalardo skates to. It was the video that got me into Radiohead, which I was like really little, and at the time Radiohead, like Optimistic, was playing on the radio so fucking frequently, and I hated that song as a kid. But then there's this other Radiohead song in this video that just rips, and Jason Dill is fucking killing it and has the best part set to that song. It got me into Iggy Pop, which at that point Iggy Pop was just a dude I used to watch on Nickelodeon. You know, that video soundtrack changed me.
I think a good example of my point of, and a notable video soundtrack as well, but my point of the song suiting the skating and the style of skating and the aesthetic is you're, as the resident Alien Workshop nerd, you're gonna have to tell me the name of the video. But what video is it that Josh Kalis skates to the Rolling Stones? I believe it's in a later Alien video.
I don't think Kalis and Mono?
Maybe.
Because in the only one after Photosynthesis is Minefield, and he skates to fucking that Boombox song.
That is, I thought the first time I heard that, I was super surprised to see him use a Rolling Stone song, but for whatever reason it fits so perfect. Even like him being a little like later on in his career, a little further down the road.
'Cause he was always skating to hip hop.
Right. Oh, he's the hip hop dude.
Yeah.
Right?
But he did skate to Marvin Gaye in that Toy Machine part too, which I thought was like kind of interesting for his persona. Mm-hmm. But it still worked. And while we're bringing up Toy Machine here, I feel Toy Machine has always had fucking great soundtracks as well. Like companies that historically weren't like tied to any specific musical image always seem to shine through with their soundtracks. Like those first few Plan B videos are great examples. Like Pat Duffy had Primus, Mike Carroll had the Beastie Boys and Hieroglyphics, Danny Way had Bad Religion, you had early Green Day in there, you had like so much, dude, Rodney Mullen skating to fucking Cat Stevens and Jim Croce and shit. You know, those soundtracks were so all over the place between like oldies and current underground shit for that time, and it really helped bridge that gap. And then Toy Machine the same way, like soundtrack like Welcome to Hell really covered all the bases. You had the Misfits, Jefferson Airplane, Sonic Youth, some weird I think it was Overton Berry Ensemble, which was the jazz shit that Satva's skating to. They really kind of went all over the place with that one. And those were originally the best soundtracks where you never knew what you were going to get. But now companies really tie in their image to a certain style of music.
I feel like there's been a certain element of that though, like throughout the history of
Oh,
skateboarding.
I mean,
like,
it started in the late 90s. I think
I was gonna say you know what you're gonna hear in a Zoo York video.
Well, Zoo York was one of them. Like, it was 100% hip hop from start to finish.
Here in the Aesthetics video.
I was gonna say Zero too, because I already brought them up with like, yeah, you're gonna have these like heavy rock songs, but like that goes in with their imagery. Like they were. It was black. There were skulls. It was fucking tight jeans and fucking studded belts. Like, you knew what you were gonna get. But then, like,
what are you gonna hear in the DGK video?
Right. But even then, you look at like Baker.
Yeah.
In the early days, and like you never knew what you were gonna get there too, because like you get them listening to 3-6 Mafia, but then people are also skating to the Pixies and fucking. Donovan and like all these fucking random ass artists, and that element I feel is less and less nowadays.
Well, that's why I like the Josh Kalis part so much, where he used the Rolling Stones, and you're right, it is mono. That's the part.
Yeah.
Is because it's, you know, it kind of has that flair to it, where like the Baker video or something like that, where you may expect one kind of song from someone, but you know, skaters are so eclectic and we like all sorts of different type of shit, and then it's like, you know, it's just like expands your mind and makes you understand skateboarding and the skater even a little more too.
And sometimes those skaters listen to things that you are kind of like surprised about, or like you get a song choice for them that you're like, I didn't see that coming. Right. And like one example that comes right to mind is Mad Circle, 5 Flavors, Carl Watson. So like for the longest time when I'd think back on that video, I thought it was him who skated to Drop by the Far Side, but it's actually Rob Welsh who skates to that song. Carl skates to a fucking Ween song. And in his Bob Shirt interview, they ask him, like, did you pick that song? Seems kind of unexpected. But, you know, Carl Watson told the story of how, like, he was on tour and someone played him Ween and he fucking dug it, man. Like, you know, in the age we live in, it's not unusual to see people picking music like that for their part. Nowadays, people are trying to really keep it on brand, I feel like.
Yeah, and I don't know. It's hard for me to think about what is used nowadays, and like just in the age of like the internet and so on and so forth, like what's used consistently. And I know your favorite, which you absolutely loathe, is I just keep picturing young skaters on Thrasher skating to trap music.
Yeah, I mean they said a lot of those Instagram edits to
the Instagram edits.
And that's why I'm starting to wonder if like some of these song choices nowadays, they matter a lot less, and that's also why so much content gets swept under the rug. It's less memorable in some way, and I mean, maybe I'm just jaded and old, but I feel like I see less parts nowadays where, like, it ends and I'm like, I want to go download that song, or I want to hear that song over and over and over again. Because when I was a kid, there would be so many songs that I would hear from videos where I was like, I have to go and hear that song again immediately.
Well, you know, times have changed and skateboarding is way more trendy and everyone follows the leader. Everyone wants to do the same thing but a little different, or what they think in their mind is cooler. And with these Instagram edits and quick little solo parts, they're really going in heavy with the ignorant rap and the trap music. And, you know, I'm a fan, sure, but, you know, it's like, come on, like, we got to be a little deeper than that. We got to try a little harder. Like, do all you guys like the exact same shit here, you know? Like, but, you know, that's a whole beast of a topic of the internet and Instagram and the full-length video kind of dying out.
Well, I mean, and there's so much music out there, so it's not hard for you to pick a unique and quality song, because you can always find music that works. I have a playlist on my iPod of about 600 songs that I'm like, okay, this song could be used for a video part. But what's funny is I'll have this song on there and I'll think no one skated to it, and then one day you watch a video you haven't seen before and someone skated to it.
Africa by Toto.
That's definitely one of them. Fuck you, Boys of Summer 2.
Yeah.
You fucking assholes.
Came out in the middle of that debate.
Yeah, my friend and I were editing a part with Toto's Africa. Those fucking assholes beat me to the punch.
As you've filmed and edited a few videos yourself,
yeah,
how do you feel? Because I've seen you operate, you know, from my view. Like, I know you sometimes have a song in mind for someone, and I know, of course, sometimes skaters really push their own agenda on you.
Yeah.
Let's get into that kind of gray, weird area of, you know, a lot of, because you read a lot of interviews, like, with pro skaters about legendary skate parts, and they're like, I didn't know the fucking song. I didn't see the part until the premiere.
I think of Bobby Puleo with that one.
A lot of other people are like, yeah, I've wanted to use this one specific song for like 5 fucking years. So what are your thoughts and feelings on that?
Well, like, I bring up Bobby Puleo. He hated the Van Morrison song in Penal Code, which I think is ridiculous.
It's ridiculous
because that song is so good.
And like, seriously, in my eyes, one of the most iconic skate parts of all time.
But for me, I mean, I've dealt with it all. I've picked songs before where the person heard it and was like, that's perfect. And I've had other skaters who are like, change my song 500 times until I find the perfect song. And even now, as I'm editing a video, some skaters text me every few days and they're like, what do you think of this song for a part? And I'm kind of at a point now where I'm comfortable enough in my editing and my knowing these people that just let me do my thing. Fuck off. I'm not gonna pick bullshit. Songs that are terrible. Like, I would never like set your shit to Katy Perry or something. But
I understand your point, but as a skater, I think that's kind of bullshit.
Oh, I mean, it's tough because I think it's right at the end credits, like Ty Evans is like just doing this commentary over everyone's name, and he's like, oh yeah, that guy's been, at one point he's like, yeah, that guy's been telling me to use this one song the entire time we've been filming this video. And like, I can only imagine for those filmers where there's way more pressure because it's going to be seen by so many people that it's way worse. I mean, I'm fucking small potatoes when it comes to that. But it's one of the reasons why the editing process truly sucks for me, because I fall in love with songs or ideas to like my friend and I just put out a part, and one of the songs I showed him was Life on Mars by David Bowie, which I thought was a super cool choice, and it like flowed really well. But he's not a David Bowie fan, and he thought the song was like too epic for what we were doing, which I can understand. But you know, I don't know, go big or go home. Pick some of these songs that like are gonna be fucking dope and they'll be memorable for a reason.
Well, I can see it with you because you're so heavy into music, you know, that I can see that would be like a really territorial, fun, nerdy part of the process for you. So I could see you holding on to that, but I don't know. I think there's different degrees to it too. If I'm some big name skater and I've been fucking putting my blood, sweat, and tears into this video part for so long, I want to pick that fucking song.
Yeah, but sometimes skaters just pick really bad songs.
Yeah, whatever they're like super obsessed with in the moment.
Yeah, and it's not necessarily just too about being the song you're obsessed with at the moment. Like, you gotta honestly think about the future and later on down the line, because something, you know, we bring up on the show often, like, nobody thought we were going to be talking about fucking Questionable and Video Days and all that shit all these years later. That shit is classic, but they also were smart in picking music that, like, we're going to look back on all these years later and be like, oh, that's still good music. Mm-hmm. Like, Cat Stevens was a good choice for Rodney Mullen. Hieroglyphics was a good choice for Sheffy, and Mike Carroll had Hyro songs in their parts. Ned's Atomic Dustbin, their one hit ever, was a good choice for Rick Howard. Like, although I feel like that part could have been edited way better, but whatever. It's the early '90s. It's different expectations back then. You know, we're still talking about it. It's why some of these videos stand the test of time. Everyone remembers that Jamie Thomas skated to Iron Maiden at the end of fucking Welcome to Hell. Anytime any skater hears Hallowed Be Thy Name, they're going to think of that. And that's important. That's why going back, why I feel so much gets swept under the rug, because people pick songs that are so quickly and easily forgotten about.
Well, there's a perfect marriage of seeing skating you like with music that you're enjoying, or it goes well. And nowadays that's totally just lacking. Think about all the banger ass footage and little parts and videos that come out that are, you know, it's a part of the recipe, but, you know, not memorable because of so many different factors, and the lackluster music being one of them. You know, like, so much of, like, the way we grew up and the way we watched videos, we tied the music with the skating, and that's a big reason why it was so memorable for us.
And we still do to some extent. I mean, so many people our age got into so many different bands because of, like, they saw Flip Sorry, or they saw fucking Baker 2G. Like, those are the things I can remember, like, seeing that shit at a young age and being like, oh, I like all of these songs. Like, I want to find out who these bands are. But as I got older, the beauty of being a music nerd and a skate nerd is that you start to know more music.
Yeah.
And you'll see videos, you'll be like, oh, I'm glad they used this song. Like, a perfect example, last year for Blessed, Supreme used the Smashing Pumpkins Mayonnaise, one of my favorite Smashing Pumpkins songs, and it's kind of a random one. And you also don't see a lot of Smashing Pumpkins songs used in skate videos, but they picked a really good song, and it fit really well with that video part. Fucking, what's that dude's name? Ben Cadow. Yeah, he was perfect for fucking skating to that song.
You think he picked it, or Strobeck?
I could see that going either way. A lot of those kids, like, love some of that shit. Yeah. Alex Olson made a comment about the first 917 video where he was saying that he didn't understand some of the musical choices that his team picked because they're all a little younger than him. And, like, I can totally understand that. Like, they're picking, like, Millencolin and fucking the Melvins and Sam I Am and, like, pop punk, but also some really good old punk. But then, you know, there's also, like, the Plugs and just some random ass stuff in there that I could see is not his thing. You know, that dude's a DJ and he grew up in LA with, like, all the trendy music around him at the time. But no, he just kind of let them have free reign, but they were smart and they picked stuff that actually stood out and was interesting. I just feel that's becoming more rare nowadays because either people are trying to uphold an image or they are going with whatever is just like a flash in the pan trendy ass track.
Where does a song selection and soundtrack fit into modern skating nowadays, you know?
I think it's taken a back seat for the most part. Yeah. I really do. Every now and then
it's also similar.
Well, that's part of it, but every now and then you'll get a video that really shines through, and I feel half the time the soundtrack is lending to it. Like that Welcome video that came out this year, that was a really good video. The skating was good and it was interesting. I didn't like walk away thinking any of those people were gonna win Skater of the Year necessarily, and they weren't skating these like incredibly like huge gnarly spots. They were just kind of skating what was around them in their area, but they picked really good music. And that's why that video is like one of the better things to have come out this year. Mm-hmm. They picked a good soundtrack, and that is super important. You need to have good music still.
I think it's definitely taken a backseat, and it's definitely watered down. I also think it's kind of funny that there's this like thing in the Instagram edit world of Instagram immediately catching the song you're using for copyright, and like people switching it always or end up having to use no music, or because that's not, unless you were a big company putting out a big video, that's not something that people really ever had to worry about. Again, to go back to what we were talking about before, I think that so much of like why things were memorable for us, again, amongst many other reasons, there just wasn't as much content, but we very deeply related the music to the skating. So I'm glad we talked about it, because I'm realizing that's a big part of how I digest skating.
Yeah, I mean, I feel it's like that
And
for
retain
everybody.
it. And honestly, as a big rap fan, like, I don't mind seeing it, because I like a lot of the music that's being used. And also, we're dealing with a different beast, because as far as like the Insta edits and even some of the solo parts are being worked on by one, maybe 2, 3 people, as opposed to a whole video. I'm making an Insta edit, you know damn well I'm going to use whatever music I'm feeling. I'm probably not going to put so much thought into the aesthetic of the little edit, or, you know, the how cohesive the music is to the skating. So, you know, it's a completely different beast altogether.
On the flip side of this, I want to also talk about what skating does for certain musicians. Because going back to Plan B, they really helped put hieroglyphics into the forefront when we were younger. You know, they helped kind of elevate their status a little bit, even though, 93 Till Infinity was a huge radio success, but their crew ran so much deeper than that one song. Plan B was great at highlighting all the members of that crew. You know, you had Casual songs, Dell songs, maybe just a couple members of Souls of Mischief songs, or like they'd pick the B-sides, like that were from fucking deep cut mixtapes for their fucking parts. You know, they kind of helped push Primus a little bit too back in the day. But then, you know, working at my job, I've had the experience of getting to tell certain bands that I discovered their music through skateboarding. And I find that after a certain point in time, musicians have different outlooks on it. So, like, here's 2 examples. The first is Built to Spill. Built to Spill have always been a fucking huge deal in the alt-rock world. But in terms of skating, like, they were just another band that, you know, got used a lot for videos. Mark Johnson, Modus Operandi, Cairo Foster, The Reason, like, they had songs in those parts. And when I went up to them and was like, yeah, I discovered your music as a kid because of these videos, and they're like, oh yeah, we get that all the time. Young people come up and tell us that. But on the flip side of that, I've met Panda Bear from Animal Collective, and I said something to him about how I loved what Animal Collective did for the Alien Workshop video and stuff like that, and his response was like, yeah, I was just happy to be a part of that. You know, he was stoked just to have his music in such an iconic video, whereas Built to Spill was like, oh, whatever, it's like our music is out there. But skating does that to artists. It helps give them a platform to reach a very youth-minded and almost naive audience who is still kind of finding out their basis in music. And I think that's why skate videos when we were kids were so important to us, because it was showing us a world of music that we might not have gotten if we weren't into skateboarding.
And like exposing their music to people who might not be interested in the first place or look for it, you know what I mean?
Well, the crossing of genres is so important there, because, like, you know, my hip-hop knowledge when I was in, like, 6th grade was, like, Eminem and Dr. Dre and Coolio. Whatever was on MTV at that point. But then I remember, like, Kalis skating to Like Whoa by Black Rob, and that showed me, like, a very specific type of hip-hop I had never really heard before. Same with those Plan B, like, the hieroglyphic stuff was so huge for me, because that was the kind of hip-hop as a teenager that I identified with way more. It was kind of a little more grimy and jazzier, and I really liked that stuff. but I didn't even know where to seek it out initially. I didn't even know it existed. And then I see all this stuff and I'm like, holy shit, like this is the rap music I actually like, not what's on the radio. Because, you know, when I was a teenager, like the shit on the radio all the time was like G-Unit, shit like that, which, you know, I had my G-Unit phase, but not the same way I got into like Hyro or Wu-Tang or anything like that was being used in those videos.
So I've heard a few different rappers say something similar to. I heard Selsky and Nicotina say the same thing, more or less. I saw this random interview with Nicotina, and they were asking him about, he, I guess, like started this like contest league or like something super random, and like a skateboard like contest.
Oh yeah, I did read about that.
Or exhibition like put on by Andre Nicotina, and they're like what's the deal with that? Like they asked him in the interview, and he's like, you know what, like I've been fucking with the skaters for years, you know, they've been using my music in their videos and we've had a connection for years. So that was really cool to hear, and it was interesting, and it makes perfect sense. And I heard the same thing from Selsky also, who's another San Francisco rapper whose music has been used in several videos. And it's, you know, leave it up to skaters to have that perfect bridge of lifestyle and culture and street culture. You know, it's very seamless. And it makes perfect sense. It's bridging two different audiences to where, like, you know, maybe these rappers had a different image of skaters, you know, they're all punks and they all listen to one thing and they all dress one way and they're all kind of the same. And same thing for what we're saying about bridging a skater to some music that they might not have heard, right? Like, you listen to a little bit of Selsky, right?
I do now, yeah. And exactly. I mean, skate videos definitely helped. The one that actually got me hooked was Raven Terche in Lakai's The Flare a couple years ago. Raven skates to fucking Selsky in his intro, and that was kind of the point where it hooked me in.
To school you on.
Yes. Jay had to tell me exactly which remix of Livin' in the Bay it was.
That's right.
So that my mind would be properly educated. All right, and you know what? I want to go back to the beginning and think of a video that the skating was all banging, but the soundtrack sucked. It just hit me. Fucking Van's Propeller. I couldn't name a single song from that video because none of them were that fucking great, except Ave skates to fucking Ozzy. That's cool. But other than that, like, none of it was super fucking memorable.
I feel like videos post 2000, like, 8 even, 2006 to 8 should be exempt from that. Just because they're so new and in this internet era and this internet age, and coming from someone like Vans, you know that Vans probably, like, big corporate was like, we have to sell 1 million of these copies, we need to put all this
the whole idea was
cookie cutter music in it.
They sold the DVDs with a pair of pro model shoes.
Yeah.
So if you got a fucking Tony Trujillo pair of shoes, you got a DVD, which was stupid. But then, like, at the same time, though, the companies that I know are still putting a lot of stock into song choice. Like the last Zero video, you could tell they were still trying to keep it zeroed out. But I didn't think any of those songs were truly memorable either. Like, Chris Cole skated to fucking Rhyme of the Ancient Mariner by Iron Maiden. Or no, sorry. He skated to Power Slave by Iron Maiden. And that was cool to hear that song in a video, but none of them really stuck with me in a way that all those old Zero videos did. And I mean, I've watched it a few times now, and it's still like nothing sticks. Now, I want to ask you this. Have you ever had a song that you wanted to see in a video part, and then it finally was, and they didn't do a good job with it?
Yeah, I've always, of course, wanted to hear and see people use Mac Dre songs in skate videos, and there aren't too many, and I can't honestly, like, I'm slipping on it right now, but someone used it recently, and it was done really, really well. But
Was it Jesse Vieira?
I think
in
it
the
was.
pizza video? Yeah, I remember that.
But you know what? Unfortunately, I believe Adrian Williams used a Mac Dre song. He used, I think, That's What's Up, I believe, by Mac Dre. And it's funny, too, because Adrian is, like, in my top 5 all-time favorite skaters. But that song for that video part, I was just like, dude, this is, like, it's freaking me out. It's, like, to my favorite rapper, favorite skater, and it's just not working for me.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes that happens and it bums me out. Like, you are so stoked that they're using this one song for a video part, and then it just doesn't fucking meld well together. And, like, one that happened recently that I was a little bummed on was in the Mark Suciu part. They used Air's Playground Love, which is a song from the Virgin Suicide soundtrack. It's one of my favorite songs ever. As an 18-year-old, it actually saved me from a bad mushroom trip. But they cut it all up and, like, melded it all
Classic
together, all
Townsend
weird.
Story.
This was Keene, New Hampshire.
Oh,
Thank you.
Excuse me.
Yeah, bruh. Get it right. But I just don't like when they cut it up like that, and they kind of just blew it with that song. They had the chance to do something truly memorable with that track, and they fucking didn't. But then sometimes you get lucky and they use a song you've been wanting to see in a video and they kill it. Like, I remember finding out Shiloh Greathouse skated to The Killing Moon by Echo and the Bunnymen in that Transworld video, and he fucking slaughtered it. Like, that song was already so huge because of another movie. You know, it was big because of Donnie Darko. Mm-hmm. And as long as I live, anytime I hear that song, I think of, you know, Donnie biking down the street to his parents' house at the beginning of the movie. But now I have two memories because Shiloh Greathouse made a part that is equally as awesome as associating that song with Donnie Darko. So, you know, there's room for both of them in my mind.
So it's a triple whammy. I'm going back a little bit to the Adrian Williams. It's a triple whammy for me because it's in the most recent FTC video.
Oh, is that Love and Hate?
Line between Love and Hate, yeah. So it's, oh man, that really fucked me up, dude.
And I want to ask this too. Do you think it's okay for skaters to repeat using songs? Because this has been an issue now within the past couple of years.
Man, I don't know. I think it depends.
Because, like, Riley Hawk used the Four Horsemen, which Danny Way and Colin McKay used in the last Plan B video from back in the day.
I think it depends for me. I think if you're the second person to use it, if it's like a very big, well-known part that or person that has used the song, I personally wouldn't do it. Yeah. Honestly, I think there's so much music out there that seems a little lazy. But, you know, I think it depends on your audience. I think it depends on the skater. But personally, I think it's a little taboo, and I wouldn't do it.
I mean, it's been done a few times where...
It's been done a bunch.
I mean, yeah, but it's been... What I was going to say is it's been done a few times where the skater actually did better the second time around. Like, perfect example is... Excuse me. Anthony Van Engelen. He did Kids from the Black Hole by the Adolescents for Minefield. And it had been used before for the very first America video, which was called Yellow. I couldn't even tell you who skated to it because that's how, like, not really memorable it is. You know, that's a video with a crazy soundtrack and a ton of people in it, but it's kind of all just, like, thrown together, and all the parts are, like, a minute long. And Flip actually used a song from that video as well for Sorry. They used Iggy Pop's I Want to Be Your Dog. Both of those examples, though, they did a better job than the America video.
Well, what about the most well-known offense of that is Guy Mariano and Paul Rodriguez.
Yeah, so in an interview, Guy said he was okay with it.
So I think, and that leads to is like a two-parter for me, and that leads to the other part is if you're paying homage, if it's like a salute, and like because P-Rod was, I think, kind of doing it like that because they were both kind of like child prodigy skaters. I think that's kind of cool.
And that's fine, but yeah, dude, that's like too classic. Like, he picked one of the most classic video parts to use the same song, and I don't know.
For those who don't know, we're talking about
The Jackson 5.
Jackson 5, Guy Mariano video days, and Paul Rodriguez in City Stars.
Street Cinema.
Street Cinema, one of my all-time favorites. Please check that out if you've never seen it and you're hearing this right now. Fucking amazing video.
But yeah,
I think that's cool. I think that's fine. I think if you're doing it with intention and there's meaning behind it, I think that's dope. But otherwise, just being lazy about it and using it, I think that's kind of whack. Using it twice.
Yeah, I think it needs to be calculated if you're going to do it. And unless your part is better than the one that came before it with that song. Like in Riley Hawk's case, I'm kind of questionable on the matter because the Danny Way, Colin McKay part was like when they were kind of inventing the mega ramp. You know, the whole part was like them skating this fucking massive half pipe to the Metallica song, and while Riley Hawk is like crushing it in the streets with that part, like,
you just can't fuck with Danny Way.
Yeah, exactly. Those are two icons, and Riley Hawk is the son of an icon, but he's not really at the point where he can just start snubbing names like that, at least in my opinion. Now, to close this out, I mean, what it comes down to is that it's all kind of personal. Like, I mean, we haven't really agreed on a lot of things in this episode.
Yeah, but it is one way or another because we talked about you being a filmer and editor. And since you're so heavy into music and the process that it's, even if you don't necessarily use exactly what the skater wants, it's personal for you. And on the flip side of that, like, you know, if you're letting the skater choose, it's usually something pretty, you'd like to think most of the time it's something well thought out and like meaningful to the skater.
Well, and also with the whole personal angle, for some of these newer videos that we are kind of like hating on as being not as memorable with their soundtracks, it might be memorable to someone who's 10, 15, 20 years younger than we are.
Right.
Like, we might just be out of touch old men, which is something to consider. But I also don't know how kids even get into music anymore.
All the listeners should always know that there's an old man factor to this show.
Yeah, absolutely. But that's the thing. Some kids, they might see some of those videos with like the music we don't fucking fully understand and think like, oh, this is the greatest song ever. Which is why I do commend some of these younger skaters and like companies appealing to younger people for picking stuff that's a little older and a little more our generation, because it's showing kids what's up. You know, like a few years ago, Tori Pudwill had the last part in that Plan B video, and he skated to You Can't Always Get What You Want by the Rolling Stones. He's like one of the biggest names in skateboarding. He could have picked any song ever, but he still picked like a very classic song. And
very dope fit too.
Yeah, it was great.
It was epic.
Even though that song had already been used too. But he probably got a handful of kids who didn't know otherwise into the Rolling Stones.
Yeah.
And that is, in my opinion, the most important part about putting out skate videos with a good soundtrack is like, are the kids who watch the video gonna walk away and be like, oh, that song's fucking dope, I want to hear that song forever.
That's right. It's our job to teach the youth about the dope shit out there.
One of my favorite stories about young skaters is like Ty Evans was telling the story about when they took Arto on his first trip in the late 90s, and being like from Finland and not really knowing all of the culture and stuff, like they always thought it was funny he didn't know who like David Bowie was or like any of these people, but they fucking showed him what was up. And then look, 4 or 5 years later, he's skating to Rock and Roll Suicide at the end of Sorry. So it is important, and I wish skate companies would think more outside of just like general image and marketing purposes, that they're influencing a generation of people to listen to quality music. So, like, anyone out there listening who has the power to put good music in a video part, like, please keep that in mind, because we don't want the next generation of skaters to be listening to fucking trash all the time at the damn skate park.